Welcome back, class. We're going to wind up chapter 6 with this fourth segment, and we're going to talk just a few minutes about market failures. And when we're discussing market failures, if you look at your definition in your text, it says the failure of private decisions in the marketplace to achieve an efficient allocation of scarce resources. And that's from, that's a similar definition that you'll see in a lot of econ textbooks when they're trying to define market failure. And for most goods, decisions of the buyers and sellers lead to the greatest possible net benefits to society. And that's what the economy is trying to do. It's trying to generate a situation where we're maximizing the greatest net benefits to society. If markets aren't competitive, or go back to what we talked about property rights, if property rights not well defined and transferable, not well defined, not exclusive, not transferable, then we end up in a situation where marginal benefit is not going to equal marginal cost. Another opportunity for market failures is we've talked about the competitive marketplace. Now we're going to talk about a non-competitive marketplace. Competitive market, lots of buyers and sellers, no single player dictates the equilibrium price. However, if you have an individual buyer or seller that can influence the market price, so they have enough market power that they can influence a market price, then market price does not equal the marginal cost. And they will actually set a market price that's greater than marginal cost, and that actually increases the opportunity cost. And one thing that I guess they use the example in the textbook of insulin. So if you were to look at the demand curve, we go back to chapter 5, where we were talking about elasticity of demand. If you were looking at that demand curve, you're probably talking about may not be completely vertical, but it's going to be pretty much vertical for insulin, which implies it's inelastic, and it also applies that it's going to take huge changes in the price to really impact the quantity demanded. So, and with insulin, if you think about it, if you're a diabetic and you need insulin, it's not going to much matter what the price is. You've got to have that insulin to survive. So that's where they're talking about individual buyers and sellers that can drive market prices. You think about it, monopolies. You think about oligopolies, where you've got a few firms that can drive it. So monopoly is a single firm, oligopoly is a few firms that can dictate market price. Think about COVID and the vaccines. At the end of the day, when the smoke settled, there were, probably two vaccines that seemed to do a good job. You had Pfizer and Moderna. So they could, to some extent, manipulate that market. At that point, it was a non-competitive market. And then the text talks for a few minutes about public goods, a good for which the cost of exclusion is prohibitive and for which the marginal cost of an additional user is zero. And I think the example they gave in the text was, fireworks. So when I was in graduate school, there was always a huge 4th of July celebration downtown in Columbus, and you could see those fireworks from a lot of different locations, from the campus at Ohio State to downtown Columbus. I don't know, maybe it was 4 or 5 miles, but you could really see that firework display even on campus at Ohio State. We lived in an outlying area, kind of outside the ring that circled Columbus, and even we could see the fireworks displays from downtown Columbus. So that's where you're talking about a public good. and remember, public goods, by definition, are non-excludable. You can't exclude people from utilizing or benefiting from a public good. And a public good is usually not produced, especially in the private sector, in efficient amounts. And then you've got the flip side of that, you've got a private good, a good in which exclusion is possible and for which the marginal cost of another user is prohibitive. And then secondarily, it says producers can keep consumers from enjoying unless they pay. And I think the example they gave in the textbook, go back to the steak example when we were talking about consumer and producer surplus. The price of a steak, if you're not willing to pay, I think in the text they said $36 for the steak. So if somebody told you had to have $36 to buy the steak, you might not be able to pay for that. So that is a private good. You can be excluded from enjoying that private good if you're not willing to pay the price. And then when we talk about public goods, you're talking about they get into the problem of free riders. And it's a problem with most public goods. Consumers or firms that consume a public good without paying directly for it. Efficient market requires a price equal to marginal cost. If the marginal cost equals zero or equals the price, then the products will not be offered in socially ideal amounts. If the price is zero, how many firms are going to produce amounts of a good where the price is zero? And that just implies that society's not going to hit their net benefits. Quantity does not maximize, again, the net benefit to society. And then the text talks for a few minutes about public goods and the government. And private firms produce less of a public good than is efficient. Quantity won't maximize your net benefits. And again, at a price of zero or a price well below the equilibrium price or well below market, marginal cost, firms aren't going to produce those goods or services in efficient quantities so that society hits its net benefit. Efficient quantity is where the demand or the marginal benefit curve equals the marginal cost curve or the supply curve. And again, just if you think about it, that's what drives this free market economy. Supply and demand coming into equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity, society's net benefits are maximized. Creates a opportunity loss via a dead weight loss. And if you go back and read in the text and just, again, think about day-to-day activities, tax revenues can go directly to providing goods and services, or tax revenues can be used to subsidize consumption. And so talking about tax revenues, especially in property tax. So if you're a federal government, income tax is taking care of defense. Maybe you're in a local school district, your property taxes are going to pay for public schools. And, the example they gave in the book was, I think it was a firm producing security services, and they were sending individuals a bill, and the individuals weren't paying them. And they do that comparison, and you look at the flip side, and if you don't pay your income tax, what do you get? And they actually make a comment in the text about it. You get that all expense vacation to Leavenworth, and if you've never been to Leavenworth, if you've never been to that area of Leavenworth, Kansas, it is a extremely depressing place because it is just, you've got military prison, you've got federal pen. There's a lot of prison activity in Leavenworth, Kansas. And trust me, you don't want to end up in Leavenworth. And then, you talk about the government can, most public goods, while they're provided by the government, may not be produced by the government. Government may take tax revenues and outsource to private firms to produce some of those goods. Government may take their tax revenues to subsidize greater private provision of public goods. And, they talk about, park maintenance and fire department and charities with tax breaks on charities. So if you give X number of dollars. I mean, IRS laws have changed over the last few years, but if you donate to a certain level of charities, you get a tax deduction. And one thing that the text talks about, and it's a concept you probably need to remember, is definitions of public-private goods are based on the characteristics of the goods or service themselves, not whether they are provided by either a public or private sector. So keep that in mind. It's a characteristic of the goods itself. Non-excludable. Remember that. Non-excludable helps define one of the defining factors of a public good or a private good. And then they spend just a few minutes talking about external costs and benefits. External cost is a cost imposed on others outside of any market exchange, and an external benefit, an action taken by a person or firm that creates a benefit for others in the absence of any market agreement. Basically, it's a bonus for bystanders. Talking about external costs, they're talking about pollution, either air pollution or water pollution, or even polluting the soil through chemical waste, or to me, COVID was an external cost. It was generated by who knows where it originated. Most people have a pretty good idea, but I don't know whether it's ever been determined exactly where it originated. But there was an external cost to a lot of us through COVID. And when we talk about an external benefit, one of them that I think about when we talk about external benefit is we lived in Southern California for 20 years before we moved to Buffalo. And probably about halfway through our stay in Southern California, the Mormon church built a Mormon tabernacle, and it was right there on Interstate 5 as you were heading down. You would head down from, we lived in Rancho Santa Fe, and you got on 5 and you went down through Del Mar, you went down through and as you got closer and closer to La Jolla, over on the left-hand side of Interstate 5 was this magnificent, white, I think it was marble tabernacle that the Mormon church had built. And it was especially in the morning, it would be kind of clouded in fog, and it was a magnificent sight. And I always considered that an external benefit. Wasn't really, driven by the market, but every time you went down Interstate 5, driving down towards San Diego or coming back out of San Diego, you got a great view of that Mormon tabernacle, and it was a magnificent structure. When we look at external cost and efficiency, especially if you're looking at pollution, there's a marginal cost for production and a marginal cost for society. And so the combination of those gets to your total cost of that. And what happens is, if you've got a marginal cost to society baked into that, then individuals, because it raises the price, individuals will actually firm. When I say individuals, I'm thinking more in terms of individual firms or maybe individual markets. Then they will produce more than is socially desirable. And the last units produced are inefficient, and again, it ends up driving that dead weight loss. So that happens with pollution. And again, you've got air pollution, you've got water pollution, you've got, ground pollution, and there is always that marginal cost to society built into that. And external cost in government intervention, the government tries to reduce the level of activity toward inefficient quantities. And they can, because if you increase the marginal cost, you're going to decrease the supply because it has trouble prices keeping up with that marginal cost. And government can institute a per unit tax. They can force firms or corporations to purchase permits, cost imposed, based on the cost imposed on others. And then as they kind of wind up chapter 6, they get into something called asymmetric information. And again, you probably haven't had the opportunity to take my healthcare economics course, but we spend a significant amount of time in the healthcare and the health market, or in the healthcare market, talking about asymmetric information. And it's a situation in which buyers and sellers don't have equal information about the qualities of a product or the other options available to them. Remember, in a competitive market, it is a complete information market. Supply and demand model assumes some information qualities. It assumes the same information about qualities and prices can cause the markets to fail or actually to collapse. And again, asymmetric information, you can get the same result with that you did when you talked about property rights, because they made the comment, authors made the comment that without property rights, exclusive property rights, transferable property rights, markets would actually collapse, similar to what we're seeing again. Examples, Portland, Seattle, LA, San Francisco, markets. You've got firms leaving, those firms that have been there for years. They are actually leaving the markets and moving out of those cities. And if you think about, just a couple of I guess, examples of asymmetric information, think about the used car market. It's one thing to go in and buy a new car off the lot, and you have the guarantees and built into that. But if you're buying a used car, I mean, yeah, you can go to Carfax and you can go to some of those types of dealers that, guarantee it. I know a lot of your car companies have, I guess, what they consider as pre-owned, guarantees, and they've done a bazillion point inspection on the car, and they're going to guarantee it for, X number of more miles or X number of years. You can buy, these insurance policies, Car Shield and Ox, and there's a bunch of them advertised on TV. Yeah, but that's and that's asymmetric information in the used car market. And the information that the buyer and the seller both have is not the same, both about the quality of the product and about the price of the product. But at least you can, if you're looking at a used car, you can go out and you can kick the tires and you can get in it and drive it. And you can make, you can open the hood and look under it. And there's a lot of things you can do to help alleviate or mitigate the impact of asymmetric information. So that's used car market. Now you turn around and compare it to healthcare. And when's the last time that you went to see your doctor and you could actually test drive the product or kick the tires on it? You pick a physician usually based on what physicians are in a given health plan's network. Yeah, you can look at where they went to medical school and, are they credentialed, and, do they have any subspecialties, and do you like where they did the residency and their internship, and, are you looking for a male or female? And you can look at a lot of these health plans are put on the website, what languages are fluent in. So, you have a lot of information out there. But when you go to see that individual at that point in time, you don't know what the end result is going to be. There is so much uncertainty within the healthcare market, and that uncertainty, a lot of it's driven by asymmetric information. It's uncertain, what your episode of care is. It's uncertain that the provider is going to accurately diagnose it. It's uncertain that he or she is going to put together a treatment plan that's going to help you, and you're uncertain about the outcome. And what we end up with in the healthcare market is what they call a principal agent issue, in where the consumer, I'm a consumer, you're a consumer of healthcare goods and services. As consumers, we're the principals. We're going to see our agent, which is the healthcare provider. and you're making the assumption as a principal that that agent has full information, that they are the absolute best physician you could go to. And at the end of the day, the uncertainty driven by asymmetric information makes healthcare to some extent a crapshoot. So asymmetric information at the end of the day, and they've got in the back of this chapter in the textbook, they've got some little blurbs in there about healthcare that's actually probably worth your reading. So get in, read those, and you'll understand what those of us that have worked as a professional in the healthcare industry, and when I say a professional, not a medical provider, but more on the administrative side through payment integrity, operations, network management, medical management, all of those types of responsibilities. And we've had the opportunity to see healthcare firsthand. And in some marketplaces, it's really ugly. And then lastly, we're going to talk for a few minutes about common property resources, and that's resources for which no property rights have been defined. Open access resources, they call them common pool resources, and the text gives you a definition that says they belong to everybody and they belong to nobody. And so you have common property right resources. There's no incentive to conserve, preserve, or protect. And the text talks about, I guess, the buffalo population. I think it's the example they use, comparing the buffalo population to cattlemen in the Old West. And if you've seen the cowboy movie Open Range, if you've seen Open Range, that's the essence of the movie Open Range. It's a common property resources at that time. It wasn't fenced in, and there were range wars in the Old West where cattlemen were going after the sheep farmers, and they were going after individuals that operated on the open range because it wasn't a common property right. And especially with the sheep farmers, they'd come in and they would just completely clean out pasture land because sheep would eat the grass down to the roots, and it was hard for the grass to come back. And again, this open range, and where we talk about no incentive to conserve, preserve, or protect, go back to your factors of production. Go back to the decision-making process that firms go through. What are we going to produce? How are we going to produce it? For whom are we going to produce it? And how are we going to preserve some? How are we going to hold back, preserve, conserve, and protect resources so that we have some to move forward in the future? So kind of common property rights, ties back to decisions that firms make as they go through the production process. That winds us up with Chapter 6. We will... next time you see me, I'm not sure what Chapter 7 is going to be in the textbook, but next time you see me, we'll come back and we'll jump into we'll go through a little review of Chapter 6, and then we'll jump into Chapter 7. Talk to everybody soon. Thanks for joining.